There he is.
Hey, hey guys,
How are you?
I'm doing good.
I am super excited to have you as usual. I say that every day, but the dialogue with our ambassadors has been phenomenal. The response has been great. And I actually wanted to do a little public service announcement before I even introduce Joao Carlos. You can find out more about Joao Carlos on his website, and we're going to spend a lot of time getting to know him a little better. But people have been asking where they can get the whole series. Last week we were talking about cycling, fishing, underwater, portraits, etc. And we've created right on the Outex website, under our community page,
Oh, very
an
cool.
outdoor photography series. And so people can navigate to the outdoor photography series page, and right there, you'll see that the whole series is available. So we talked with Brian Hose about cycling, with Jessica Hadel about fishing, with Carla Durante about underwater. And once we're done with this live interview, we'll also edit it with Joao Carlos and post it to our YouTube channel and on our website so that you guys can access all of it and hopefully continue to enjoy other parts of the series. All right, so let's get to it. Joao Carlos is another multi-talented photographer whose love of photography started early on, and I'll let him talk about that a little bit. He splits his time between Europe, where he spends a lot of time in Portugal, and New York City, where he was born, I believe. But he really travels quite a bit. And even though, again,
Used to anyway.
multifaceted photographer, filmmaker, he has shot on everything from film, DSLR, mirrorless, medium format. But today we're going to narrow the conversation a little bit to commercial photography, but I'm sure we'll talk about some other stuff. So Joao Carlos, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. Let me ask first, tell us a little bit about your journey. How did you start in photography, your passion in the early days? How did you end up where you are today?
Well, it's funny. Recently I discovered, I guess the first present that I ever asked my mom for Christmas was a camera. I was about 5 or 6 years old. And at the time she gave me like a little disposable camera, and she gave it to me for Christmas, and I looked at it and I go, well, mommy, it doesn't have a flash. And I gave it back to her, and I'm like, I want a real camera. So I think that was like my first kind of like introduction to it. And I remember as a kid, my grandmother used to have this Polaroid camera around, and I used to steal her Polaroid and take pictures of basically everything, right? And then growing up, I was always into drawing and painting and stuff like that. So I kind of evolved, I used to draw cars and spaceships, and at one point I think I wanted to be a car designer. And then in high school, I wanted to be a painter. And then I fell in love for music, and obviously I wanted to be a rock star like anybody else, in high school. And it's funny because I was really, really bad at it. And I went to school, and I tried to learn to play the guitar, and I was terrible. And I actually sold my first guitar to buy my first camera, and I was about 17. And then, I went to college and I studied painting, and then I switched my major kind of halfway through to photography. One of my arts teacher was like, you're doing all this stuff with photography based stuff, and you really need to maybe think about doing that instead, just because of the technique was more, I think it was a lot more technique involved in the photography, like more challenging. So he thought that for me to really evolve on my painting, that I should kind of pick up on my photography. And then I dropped the painting, and I've been taking pictures ever since. And then early on in my career, to pay for school, I was actually working at a local newspaper, and they had like 2 or 3 different newspapers that I'd go from like coast to coast. In Portugal, it was like they had like 3 different newspapers for the region. And I would shoot mostly their sports and anything that were like theater or anything in the arts, stuff that I could do on the weekends, because during the week I was at school. And this was back in the film days, so they really didn't pay me much they only paid me for the photos that got printed, but I was able to, use their film. And so film is expensive, so it was a way for me to, quickly learn on the newspaper's dime, I guess. And then from there, I think I don't know, I think in my career, and I think this happens with most of us, we have 2 or 3 moments that really change us, and they really mark that difference in our careers. So definitely my teacher in college saying that, you know, I should pick up a camera and switch my major instead of painting to switch it to photography. And I think that was made like a big difference in my career. And then on the weekends, you know, I used to party a lot, and I was at a club, and the owner of the club, they always had live bands, and I figured if I photographed the bands, eventually I'd be able to do the album covers. Well, it's funny because I ended up doing tons of album covers after that, but never through that contact. But I met a guy who knew a guy. That's kind of how it goes in the industry, who worked at a commercial advertising photography studio. And he's like, you know, I see you around on the weekends shooting. I kind of like your attitude and stuff. You know, we're looking for interns at the studio. And I was in my second year of college, and you know, I went for a meeting. I had my portfolio under my arm, and I go into this massive studio, and it had like all this gear and equipment, and it was so much more than what I had at school. And you know, I remember like the first job we did was like a major cover of a magazine with like one of Portugal's supermodels at the time, and that was it. I started like the next day after the interview, I started working there, and I worked for him for about 3.5 years. And looking back, it's been, you know, a 23-year-long career.
So let's talk a little bit about the evolution of your work itself. You know, again, I mentioned that you've shot everything from video, a DSLR, film, I'm sure. What are you shooting now? What are some of your go-to cameras, lenses? Do you have one?
It's actually funny. Hold on. I have, so my go-to camera that I work with like for everything is actually right here. And it's a medium format Fuji GFX. And it's funny. I know that we weren't going to talk too much about Outex exactly, but it's amazing that I can actually use a medium format camera with my Outex setup because I can have the ability to really blow images up. And, you know, I can do billboards, or I can like overly process some of my work because in the commercial market, sometimes you really have to. So, you know, but again, it's medium format, but it's like the size of a DSLR. So this is a GFX 50. This is probably my go-to workhorse. This is actually my favorite everyday camera. And this is it's a Fuji X100V. No, this is a 100V.
I got it.
So it's a fixed lens. But I think, so for all you pros out there that, you know, shoot with medium format or you're shooting with DSLRs and stuff, what happens is I think when we start working on a commercial level, it's all about business and work, and you only pick up your camera when you're going to work. And since I've had, I had a previous little smaller Fuji like this, the 100F. And since I've had this is basically the camera that I take with me everywhere. So like all my travel stuff, my family pictures, I'm shooting like, I think it's like 30 frames per second. So considering the size, and it's a fixed lens. And I like the fixed lens because, and I usually it makes you think a little bit more, you know?
Seen a couple of questions come in. We are going to do a lot of Q&A, but we'll try to address some of them that are relevant to the topic we're discussing. One of the questions that came in is, what kind of range does your fixed lens give you? You know, do you do the range yourself? Do you allow the lens to do it? How do you feel about that?
Yeah, again, it's a fixed lens, so I guess the range is really the distance, you know? It's either you take 2 steps forward or 2 steps back.
Okay.
For this camera, you know, I end up using a zoom lens, but the zoom lens style a little bit quicker.
So Joao Carlos's work, in addition to a link on our website under our professional ambassadors, you can also see a lot of his work at joaocarlosphoto.com, where you can learn about his background and the work that he's done. You can see a lot of his commercial photo, and you can also see him at Joao Carlos Photo on Instagram. So there are lots of different places that you can find out about his work. He's reconnecting his Wi-Fi. And when you go on a shoot, you normally, I'm assuming for commercial shoots, since that's what we'll focus on today, you've already been briefed. How much influence do you have on the creative process of a commercial shoot, and has that evolved over time?
Well, yes, it definitely evolved. I think right now, I think I've come to a point, gratefully, that a lot of my clients come looking for me because they want a certain style and a certain look, or because of the complexity of the shoot. I think, we've got a lot of photographers in the business, so it's really hard for us to kind of establish ourselves as being different or being unique. And although I don't consider myself to have a very fixed style, I am very adaptable. So, those clients that have either a complicated shoot because it's, either I'm working with like dogs and kids and like just weird situations, or because it's a complex setup for some reason, or a lot of times I think what happens is because I have like a really short time frame, clients are coming to me. For example, that image right there, the high fly, that one right there, that's a really interesting setup, and that's where like clients come to me, because that's for an airline company, and they wanted their airline hostess to actually be doing a different water sports, but they had all these limitations. And actually this campaign has just been nominated for an advertising award this year, which I'm pretty excited about.
It's awesome. Congrats.
Yeah, thank you. This actually, I got to use my Outex stuff here, and this is cool because, for example, the model, which is an actual airline stewardess, flight attendant, she's actually she's in the studio, but she's set up to that rig. So she's all rigged up, and you can see it in the behind the scenes stuff. But then the water and a mix of shooting real water and then compositing it in to get the final image. Client, this might be a bit too much. I'm not really sure I can pull this off. And if you want to get the job done, you should talk with Joao. And that I think happens, more and more right now in my career. So I'm getting harder and more complex jobs to do, but I really like the challenge. And I think that's also why my work is so diverse, and why I shoot so many different subject matters. Like if I was shooting fashion every day, I think I'd get really bored. So I like shooting advertising because it gives me a challenge, more out of the box. I love shooting portraits, but recently I've been shooting like more animal portraits. So I've been photographing like horses and stuff like that. Okay, for example, that's a campaign I shot for SanDisk, and that's kind of cool because, and this is another thing that clients are asking for a lot, is they want a mix of stills and video. So I've been doing a lot more of that, where they want to have the same feel for the stills that they want to have for the video. This is actually shot on location where the world's largest super waves are. So in Nazaré, they've got the largest waves in the world. They call it the Canyon, and it's amazing. Yeah. And it's amazing because there's this place right next to it. Like here, SanDisk, for example, they gave me a hard drive, and they're like, here, we need you to create something that's kind of cool with this SSD drive that can, be thrown on the in the sand. You can drop it. Everybody thinks I'm super clumsy because I drop it like 3 or 4 times in the video. But it's cool because, I also, I work with the creative department, like advertising agencies, but a lot of bigger brands today, they have their marketing in-house. So instead of having like all these concepts with advertising campaigns, like coming from the agencies, they're doing it in-house. And sometimes they have a concept like, okay, we've got this product and it can do this and that, but give us some ideas for it. So for that, I was able to go and create that concept, and they loved it. And then, I like to do little things like SanDisk, their colors are black, white, and red. So I'm like, well, wouldn't it be cool if you've got a model in this red dress and a white horse? Perfect, So I like being, I think today I'm not only a photographer and a director, but I like being a creative director also. Like to put the concepts together. So it builds a lot from there. Like recently I did a shot for Heuer Watches. And it's funny, like most when you're working in a commercial environment, most photographers, we're always competing against 3 or 4 other photographers. A client will ask for a quote from, 3 or 4 other guys. So at this point, they already knew kind of what they wanted. They wanted a guy on a motorcycle, and they had 4 or 5 different watches from the brand that they wanted to feature. But I was able to go and give them kind of my own look and feel, and I brought in a lot of little details that I think in our first meetings before I got the job, when I was talking with the brand director, I was able to go and sell it and pitch it to them in a different way. And I think that's what, that's how you can really bring yourself apart from your competition. So like, for example, that campaign, the client said, I want to have these gloves, and, I want to have a cool motorcycle. But then it's my job to pick the right motorcycle. And the gloves, instead of going out and buying some gloves, I actually had them custom made with the client's logo.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Well, because
cool.
I figured I was going to do a lot of detailed shot of the watches. And to have the gloves there, to have another brand, it would just be another brand getting mixed up with their own brand. So I thought it would be a lot more interesting, where you could see, it says Frank Muller on the glove, and then you've got the watch that says Frank Muller, and so it keeps it more consistent with their own identity.
Okay. And so
yeah, I mean, I was going to have to spend the money anyway on the gloves that they wanted, so I ended up actually getting more affordable, cooler, custom. We made 4 different pairs of custom gloves, and nobody else has them.
Right. It's super cool. So to recap then, you were fortunate enough that you kind of knew what they wanted, but they were still flexible, that your creative vision matched with theirs. And once you got the go to be the commercial photographer, to do the campaign, can you tell us the story, not only about the setting in which that picture is in? I'd love for you to talk about your creative vision of where it was going to take place, more about everything from the model, the directing of the model, to the settings of the camera.
Sure.
How many shots it took to get the shot you wanted, the settings that you used, that kind of thing. Can you tell us the story of this shoot as an example?
Yeah, if you go to the gallery of the whole campaign, you'll see that's actually, I think it might be. So this was complicated because the client, they wanted 2 things. They wanted stills and video. So that made my job a lot more complicated. And then it's funny because everything was, people look at images like this and everything is thought of. Like the motorcycle was thought out of, the clothing that he's wearing, the helmet. Like, for example, this helmet is completely reflective, and then it's got a mirrored front to it. So my team had to be set to a really small number of people that were in the shot, where everybody would get reflected inside.
Right.
They wanted this kind of gentleman driver. That was the briefing, was the gentleman driver. So weeks before, I'm watching all these different videos on the history of gentleman drivers and what they're about. I do a lot of research before. And then I did location scouting. My location scouting, it's super important for 2 reasons. Location scouting, not only for me to know where I'm going to shoot, but to actually see the perfect time of day to shoot. For example, because of all the reflectiveness and because of the watches, everything was shot in daylight. But I had to shoot in daylight where there was only shadows. If I were to shoot it with a lot of sunlight, there'd be too much glare and too many reflections. So I tried to keep my sun to a minimum, and I'm really only shooting the shadows, for example.
Okay.
And then, for example, so we had 2 different motorcycles that we were using. There were 5 different watches, and the locations were all around Lisbon. Now, I had asked for all of these different permits to shoot in these different places, and permits were really, really expensive at the time. And it's funny how things just happen. I got an invitation to this bar/restaurant, and they had just launched this whole cafe racer motorcycle theme, and they had this awesome place where, so there's a Corvette. That Corvette was in the hotel's, the Raw Hotel. It was in their garage, so I was able to use that. Open to the options of the day. half of the locations that I had asked for permits, my permits were denied, or they were really expensive, and I didn't have the money in my budget to be able to do this. So I ended up having to keep it kind of run and gun. So the whole team was fairly small. And for this campaign, I actually shot with the camera, the Fuji GFX, the 100. And it's a camera that's a medium format 100 megapixel camera that I can also shoot 4K video with. So it was, you know, I'm shooting stills and video literally at the same time. And then I've got another backup cameraman who's doing like all the extra B-roll stuff that we used to cut in to make the video. So I'm shooting stills. I get the stills done. The client confirms that they like the stills, and then I go in and I shoot the video. Does that kind of sum it up?
Absolutely. Let's talk a little bit about the settings, because that campaign is maybe a good example, and I wanted to understand about the look and creating a look that embodies what the client may want or what you have a creative vision for. Do you work with presets? Do you have certain settings that you like? Do you have a certain look? Do you truly just adapt to the circumstance? Can you?
Yeah, I think as commercial, I think as commercial and advertising photographers, I think it's all about adaptability. Every project for me is, you know, a new experiment. It's a new look, a new feel. I think in overall, I try to make my projects all kind of look like my work, but you'll see that everything is really diverse. For that, one piece of gear that I didn't talk about that was really important was I actually used a really long lens. And I used a super long lens with an adapter to even make it longer. And that was so that I can distance myself from my subject so that we wouldn't show up reflected in the visor. You know, I wanted the post-production to be very limited. And it's funny, like originally my clients, they used for like in this case, they wanted 12 images. And they ended up actually at the end of the campaign going with like 24. And that's also, you know, that's always really great because when you think you need to under promise and over deliver. And that's what I try to do. So I don't really believe in presets. I think the look and feel has to be very much adaptable to what we're going for. It's funny, that campaign has been shared and reshared, and it kind of went viral, like all the motorcycle guys and the cafe racer guys on Instagram. They love that campaign. And a couple of the feeds, you know, that image has had like 40, 25, 30, 35, 40,000 viewers on like all these different campaigns. And it's funny because everything was supposed to be shot on location outside, and because my day went by so fast, there were a couple of detailed shots that I wasn't able to do. So I ended up doing some extra images in the studio the following Monday. This was shot over the weekend. For example, I like to shoot on weekends when I've got like motorcycles and all this stuff because there's less traffic in the cities, so it makes it a lot easier. You know, all this was shot in downtown Lisbon. The client wanted a really high-end look to the campaign. You know, it needed to look expensive. I mean, we had 500,000 euros worth of watches on set. You know, there was one watch that cost 150,000 euros. So, you know, when you're dealing with the watch that costs that much, that one, for example, costs, I think it was 145,000. You know, everything has to look luxurious. You know, the watch costs more than the motorcycle.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so to your point, being able to let the images tell the story and paint the picture that both the client and you have in your head is what's important. So really being familiar with how to accomplish that, how to work within the environment that you're in, all sound super important.
Yeah, it's all about adaptability.
How do you direct models? Do you work, you know, because I notice you do some work where it's not just models. You know, sometimes I guess you're working with drivers or athletes or fashion, where the model, you know, it is modeling for you, but they're also part of the story.
It varies. For example, this campaign, even though the driver doesn't have you can't see his face. He's got a helmet on. I really needed somebody who was elegant, who was sleek, who had that right look and feel. So I actually have a buddy of mine who's a model, Rodrigo, who's amazing actually. And he's got like, he's all tattooed, and you see him like from his face is the only part of his body that isn't tattooed. So he's got this like great looking commercial face, and then all of him is tattooed, but since his body would be all covered, I really only needed the body expression. So it's funny, in the video, the guy driving the motorcycle is actually somebody different than the guy in the pictures.
I see. So it's like a stunt double.
Well, yeah. So the motorcycle is from a client of mine, Bandit Garage. They're in the north of Portugal, and they make the most amazing, beautiful motorcycles. Like, I love. We've got an idea of what we like and what we want. I was able to say, they actually showed me a bunch of motorcycles that he liked, and half of the pictures I had actually already taken them for my other client. And they didn't even know that. So the watch brand didn't know that I had taken the images of, the motorcycles. And they're the motorcycle designer / builder. He's the guy who's driving around and going back and forth. But again, I'm very much adaptable. Like, I love working with talent. So I love working with actors because they have so much expression. Models can be amazing because you can direct them, and they've got, it's all about body knowledge. Like, they know how to move and how to express themselves. But then sometimes when you're just working with normal people, it's great because they give that authenticity, to the image. So it really varies. I mean, I like, so here you can see, look, it's small set. It's just me and him here, and everybody like is away. We actually got called out on this location, and we had to leave a little bit sooner. They're like, look, pack up your stuff and leave. But I warned my client before that. So I picked the locations that we wanted to go to, and I said, look, we don't have permits for this, so there's a possibility that we might have to, get kicked out of this place or that place or whatever.
Yeah.
But I balanced it. So I had permits for some places and not for some others.
Yeah, the reflectability on the helmet and the fact that you're working in a busy street environment without the permits, adaptability, I think you nailed it on how important that is.
Yeah.
What advice, and again, I want to encourage people to ask questions. So if you have
questions for sure,
send them our way. What advice do you have for photographers that either want to get more into commercial shoots so that they can improve their craft or get a gig?
Well, I mean, that's, I think you said it right in the question. The only way is you have to keep shooting and shooting and shooting and shooting. And, I wanted to shoot, for example, I was a little tired of shooting editorial, and I wanted to take my work into more commercial kind of realm. So I found the most awesome bike builder, and I said, look, I'm gonna shoot 2 of your motorcycles at a little bit lesser cost, and let me work with you and try to kind of create something kind of cool. So I went and I built up my portfolio in a certain look and style. So let's say you want to photograph cars, or you want to photograph like lifestyle. I mean, you need to create the images that you want to work on and work with. So after shooting one or two motorcycles and kind of getting a certain look to my work, I then had brands coming to me who wanted images in that style. So I guess if you want to shoot the work, if you want to get the work, you got to shoot the work.
What questions haven't I asked that I should have? What else should I know about commercial photography and that the audience should know about?
Well, I think one of the challenges in commercial work, and I think a lot of photographers really don't know, is like, for example, the client here, they gave me a budget, but I needed to see if I could, like, all the client knows is their idea was, look, we want to have 6 airline hostesses, and one is going to be doing windsurfing, one's going to be doing kite surfing, one's going to be doing bodyboarding, and that's all they know. So they have no idea how much a windsurf is going to cost, how much how much a kite surf is going to cost. So a lot of it's thinking out of the box. And this is really cool. Like, for example, I gave my client a lot of, I think the biggest tip I can say is that as commercial and advertising photographers, we have to be problem solvers. And if you're not prepared to be a problem solver, if you're only going to create problems, then you really won't go far in the industry. You know, and that's what I do. I solve people's problems.
That's very insightful, Joao. That's great to know.
There's a really cool, one of my favorite images here was actually, it's the girl who shot, this one's cool. She's in, she's doing kite surfing. And, you know, when you're kite surfing and you're in the air, your body has a certain kind of way of moving. So I thought, how can I make this happen? And one of my assistants is actually a rigger. He works on movie sets, and he's a stuntman. And so I brought him into my studio, and we actually rigged up the models in different harnesses so that they can get different body motions and movements. So for example, the girl underwater, when you see her, she actually looks like, you know, she's underwater, like her, you know, you can see her whole body, the way she's changing and she's moving. Like when you see the final image, she's in that pose. It's like she's underwater there.
Right.
So again, we need to be problem solvers. That's really what it comes out to. And awesome. So yeah, the girl underwater, she's hanging in such a way. Here she is. So we did tests. And for example, what I like to do is on my bigger shoots, if it's in the studio, I'll do pre-light. You know, everybody's like, oh, your lighting is amazing. But that's because I spent 2 days maybe testing out different lighting setups and seeing what could work, so that on the day of the shoot, I'm not spending all this extra time figuring that out. You know, I'm more worried about my posing and working with my client to figure out certain little details than the mechanics of the more complex stuff on my end.
Unbelievable. This is all amazing stuff. I always enjoyed working with you. You know, the times that we had together in Portugal were not only very informative and educational for me, but a lot of fun. So thank you so much for joining us.
Is our time over already?
Well, you know, if you want to stay longer, we can. But, you know, I just didn't want to take too much of your time.
No, it's okay. We've got a couple of questions here that are actually pretty good.
Okay, what questions did I miss? My team may have fielded some of them already.
Blackstone Abbey Productions asks, should we rent gear for commercial shoots, or should we own your own gear?
Okay.
And I think that's a really good question. Number one, you have to see, like, for example, if you're in a market where you can't really rent a lot of gear, then you might not have that many options. Mm-hmm. If you're in a market where you can rent gear, I was going to say, you know, if you're only using a certain lens once or twice a year, maybe it's better to rent that lens and invoice that to your client as an expendable expense, instead of, you know, having to cash out all this money for this, you know, lens or a camera that you're only going to use once or twice a year. So I thought that was a pretty good question.
Adaptability and problem solving.
Yeah.
What other questions?
Again, it's like, for example, the large lens that I shoot with for the Frank Mueller campaign, that wasn't with mine. Okay, this is actually an interesting shoot. This is for Heuer Watches, and they actually don't even use this image right here. It's one of my favorite images of the campaign, and they don't use it because you don't see the watch. But I only had about an hour and a half to shoot 5 watches in the back of, well, it was right after weekend races in the Algarve. But everything was really quick. It was like in the pit lanes, it was raining, it was a horrible day. And I ended up having to kind of make it look like it was a nice, sunny, great day.
You know, I love the themes that I got from this conversation, like adaptability, flexibility, problem solving. Those resonate with me.
Oh, I lost, sorry, JR, my connection.
That's okay. We can still hear you. I was saying that the themes that I picked up from what you've mentioned, like adaptability, flexibility, problem solving, those really resonate with me because we work with so many different photographers, not just photographers and cinematographers, in many different areas. And the reality of storytelling nowadays is that more and more, like you said, you're juggling, you're handling multiple tasks, you're creating in multiple environments, and you're having to conform to whatever environment and situation that you're in. And so being able to have gear that adapts to you, that travels with you, those are all similar things that, you know, led us to come up with our product concepts.
Well, I was gonna say that. Sorry to cut you off, but it automatically brings me to like what drove you to Outex. So, for example, I'm like a lot of the other Outex ambassadors. I mean, that's all they shoot is underwater, you know, sports, adventure, fishing. They're all amazing creatives, but they kind of use their Outex gear all the time in all these crazy underwater environments. And for me, like, it didn't make sense. I do maybe 2 or 3 underwater shoots a year, but then I'm doing shoots where there's water outside. You know, I'm like, you know, sometimes I want to create a rainy situation, or sometimes I'll go and I'll create a situation that's, you know, that, for example, you know, I'm shooting underwater fashion, but I didn't want a system, that would pigeonhole me to one camera, because I've got friends of mine who have like those hard cases, and, you know, they have the same camera because they spent 2 or 3 or 5,000 euros on a case, and then they're pigeonholed to that one camera. When I found the Outex system, I'm like, wait a minute, I can use this on like all these different cameras, and it was so adaptable. So it really kind of resonated with me as a creative, and working in these different fields in different markets and kind of different subject matter, that Outex can kind of come with me anywhere. So like one of my dreams is I want to go to India and I want to do the Holi festival. And again, like, I don't see having one of those big underwater cases and doing the Holi festival, where I know that when I go there, I'll be able to do it with the Outex system.
Right. Yeah, we're going to have a session with another one of our ambassadors next week that's talking specifically about the Holi Festival. So to your point, you know, it's nice to not only be able to do certain things, but to be able to do multiple things. We got another question from the audience. You talk about testing light settings beforehand, and that you spend a lot of time and you put a lot of thought into it.
Yeah, I call it pre-light.
Pre-light. He's asking if that's to your taste, or if you ask a client what he's specifically looking for.
Well, okay, for example, I'm, you know, they've got a whole bunch of regular contributors. I've been contributing with them since like 2012, I think. It's been like 8 years that I've been working with the magazine. So maybe if you go to the left there, you can see one of my shots of the Abraham Lincoln campaign. Or that's another cover shot. So we usually do 2 covers per shoot. And it's always a really big team: hair, makeup, models, hair assistant, styling assistant, stylist. There's the creative director of the magazine. There's director of the magazine. So there's all these different people on set. If I'm fidgeting around and trying to figure out what I'm doing, it makes for really long shoots. And what I usually do is I'll do my pre-light the day before for the first look. And literally, like, the team arrives at 10 o'clock. And by 12 o'clock, 12:30, we're done. We go to lunch, and then we start right after lunch on the second cover. And I'm able to do 2 covers, you know, super early. I mean, I think this for this shoot, we were done by like 3 in the afternoon. We got both covers done, and that was it. So it's, you know, I do it because I want to make my client's job, you know, it's all about an experience. So if I'm spending too much time on set figuring out my lights and testing and whatever, I'm not giving my client the right attention that they need. You know, I want to be relaxed on set, and if I'm setting up and it's all too complicated, I don't have that same vibe. So I think that
comment about
that answers, yeah.
Yeah, I think so. We got another comment about this being great for food shots. And have you done a lot of food commercial work?
No, interesting enough, I actually don't. I have a friend of mine, so even though I do a lot of different types of photography, there are certain things that I really don't do, and food is not really my thing. I love eating, I love drinking, but actually taking pictures of food is really not my thing. I do a little bit for the magazine because one of the segments that I shoot for them is some travel stuff, and during the travel stuff, and you really won't find that on my website anywhere. So for the travel stuff, I'll go and do some food here and there, but I usually have, I've got friends in different fields, and I've got an amazing buddy of mine who's got an awesome studio set up for food photography. He has a really great kitchen. He actually works with a chef who I introduced him as a chef and a food stylist. So, again, I think we need to be kind of specialized in different fields, and we need to invest in that specialization. So food for me really doesn't make sense. However, pre-lighting, I think we can adapt to a lot of different styles of commercial work. If you're shooting food, or if you're doing products in the studio, or, if you're shooting with models and it's more complex, then I would say definitely pre-light.
Awesome. We're getting lots of compliments on your great work, your great lighting, and your great frame of mind. So thank you for that, guys. Miguel. What else? What other projects? I mean, I think your website is amazing, by the way.
Oh, it's a work in progress.
It embodies what you're talking about. It tells the story. It shows the behind the scenes. It's funny because obviously we have a website, and on one hand, it feels like there's a generation of people that don't think of websites anymore, right? If it's not on social media, if it's not on YouTube and Instagram, it's like people ask on social media, where do I find out more about your product? And I'm thinking, have you heard about Google and the internet?
And there you go.
On the other hand, some people struggle with knowing where to find things. And so the website is great. It tells a story. It shows a lot of behind the scenes work. What are you excited about next?
For the month of April, this is my birthday month. My birthday's on Saturday. I offered away a free hour coaching to any photographer, creative who wants to kind of take advantage of my years of experience. And it's been kind of overwhelming about the amount of people who have accepted my offer. And so far I've done more than 40 one-to-one coachings. And it kind of made sense that there are a lot of people who, even with all the different platforms out there, and I think we all kind of need a mentor. And I know that I owe so much to my mentors early on in my career. So it's been a kind of a good way for me to give back. So that's in the works for sure.
Exciting.
And then it's funny, people talk about websites and social media, and I look at it this way. What happens when Instagram has a glitch and they're down for 48 hours? So all these photographers who don't have websites aren't photographers anymore.
Right.
I think your website is like your main, it's like your main base, and then everything else is just like an extension of that.
Good point. And I think that answers one of the questions that we got from another Joao in the audience, asking whether it's worth investing in a website in this time of social media. And I think you've just answered that. Oh,
for sure. Again, I think your social media reach is just so far. I think, a lot of brands, they're still going to go and search for you, and they're still going to find you on, let's say Instagram or Facebook or whatever. But then they want to look back and they want to see, what you're about, what you're doing. I don't know. I think my website, I still think websites are very, very much part of what's so important. Not only websites, but I still use print materials. So like, I won't go to a meeting and I won't use an iPad, I actually go to a meeting and I have like these little books that I use, and I've got a printed portfolio, and I've got like, it's a business card, but it's like a step up from a business card.
Got it.
I still think print sells it the best way. Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. What
So
else?
Outex Europe has a question or a comment that I wasn't too sure. Funny that one of our favorite photos in Joan's campaign is not in Joan's top 10.
Yeah, which one is that?
Which one was that? Actually, going back to the light testing, you know, sometimes clients, they will want kind of a certain light and they will want a certain look and feel. And I need to go and figure out, like, I don't want to, the day of the shoot, I don't want to look like I'm figuring stuff out. You know, I want to make sure that it's all been thought out. So that's why I'll do a lot of testing in that sense. Yeah, I used to have a travel page, Instagram page, and it became really complicated to kind of work on both pages and stuff. So I ended that, and I'm putting all my focus on my one page. And now it's just a matter of kind of getting that with the same look and same feel. Interesting enough, you know, I shoot interiors, hotel stuff, and you won't find any of this currently on my website. I kind of thought that I didn't have it organized properly enough. So recently I've taken it all down. And it's again, it's constantly a work in progress. And, you know, I think we need to, see, there's some of my food photography.
Yeah.
I think we need to constantly be reinventing ourselves and kind of stretching our limits and practicing new techniques. And we should only post not only our best work, but we should post the work that we want to be doing the most.
Mm-hmm.
So like right now on my website, you know, the way I set it up, you know, I want to do a lot more automotive. I want to shoot more cars and more motorcycles, for example. So when you get to my website, that's like the main feature that you see. But then, you know, I've got a lot of years experience shooting fashion and all these crazy sets. So that's like the next work that you see. And then my commercial work is kind of a mix of everything right now. So that'll kind of flow a little bit everywhere. And then I guess as my work, as I develop into different markets and I create different bodies of work, you know, I'll constantly be updating my website. I think a mistake that photographers do is they have a website, but then they don't really update it. You know, they'll update it once a year. You know, I do regular updates monthly. I send out a newsletter. You guys, I'm sure you receive my newsletters with new projects that I'm working on and what I've been doing. So all of that is, you know, new content that I get to share to my clients, and that brings me eventually more business.
Yep. And we've also noticed that you also are active on social media, so you bring them together. You're using your website, you're engaged in social media, you've got a good balance of personal stuff, professional stuff, keeping people informed and engaged. We got a question about any personal
it's important.
Personal projects after the pandemic?
Yeah, interesting enough. So I came, when the pandemic started, I'm going to be honest with you guys. I was in a really good place work-wise, and I was supposed to be in New York the second week of March, shooting for a regular commercial client there. And then I had 2 catalogs to shoot in the third week of March. Then I had another makeup editorial. Like, I was full of work and all these projects, and in literally 2 days, everything got canceled, and that was it. So it kind of hit me pretty hard, and I really wasn't too sure. So I think the first 10 days of the pandemic of social distancing, I guess, I basically spent them home alone, like most of us did, just catching up on my Netflix and figuring out what was next. And then after that, I decided to come up to the countryside, leave Lisbon Center, and come out to the countryside to where my parents live. And they're like by the beach and in the country, so I could go out running. And my major personal project has been myself. So like, I've been exercising a lot every day. You know, I've been running 9-10K a day.
Wow.
I'm working on my summer body. Yeah. I don't know if we're going to have one, but you know, next time we shoot an Outex video, I won't look like the Marshmallow Man. There you go. Well, see, it's funny. I've been shooting for this men's bathing suit line for like the last 7 years, and this year was the first year because of. So when this happened, I was actually literally doing location scouting and all these different concept ideas for the shoot, and it ended up getting canceled. And you know, the client's gonna go and they moved it for next year, so it's not part of this year's shoot listings, right? But I told myself last year that when this year happens, when we shoot it again, that I need to look decent, because usually like I'm underwater and we're taking all these pictures, and I've got all these super buff models, and here I am at 40 looking like I got a dad bod. So I needed to change
Nothing wrong with that. I said nothing wrong with the dad bod. Here's the dad with college kids.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but see, I don't have kids yet, so that doesn't work. That's the thing. So that was a big thing right there. And then I'm actually in a group with these photojournalists, and my cousin, there's another photographer in the family who's a photojournalist. He shoots for a press agency, and he started a group on WhatsApp, and then he went and he created this Instagram page called Everyday COVID. I don't know if I talked to you about that before. And that kind of has given me a chance to, So when you go on my Instagram, I've got some family pictures there, and that's kind of been like what I've been taking pictures of, is try to take advantage of, I've got some images, I think, of my mom and dad. So yeah, those images right down there, down below, down. That's my great grandmother, she's 95, and those are my folks right there.
That's great.
So this is kind of a little bit out of my norm, but those are families today, connected apart, or connected together.
I will borrow from the question and talk a little bit about that as well, because like you, we were all somewhat shocked and going through different stages of dealing with the reality and the uncertainty. And I've always had this attitude of trying to remain both positive and productive. And so a couple of things, on a personal level, we do have a lot of customers, and many of our customers, like you, have become friends of ours. And historically, we've had government agencies like the FBI using Outex to protect the integrity of crime scenes, because they don't want to insert contaminants into a crime scene. And while the user may be wearing gloves and masks and so forth, that doesn't prevent the camera from contaminating a scene.
Well, and that's the thing. Cameras have all these places where, like, hairs, and I mean, I'm not even going to talk about the virus, because now that's like a whole other thing. But until then, it makes so much sense. Like, I only noticed this a couple of days ago, and I had no idea. And I know that moving forward in the industry, a lot of things are going to have to change. And I think I'm going to need to talk to you guys about getting the version with the Outex that I can put my tripod to.
Yeah.
Because until now, I didn't really think about me like shooting underwater with the tripod, but now I think I'm going to have to start shooting in the studio with the tripod mount.
Yeah.
So that makes, the tripod mount and the tethering mount too.
So we got the tripod adapter. Yeah.
So I think it brilliant.
Yeah, no.
So I think in the studio, that's going to make a lot of sense for photographers also. Like, so, if you're out there, like for my everybody at the Everyday COVID project, they're going to need to check out the options that Outex have. And I mean, these are some photojournalists. All of them are mostly photojournalists, and they're in like some really deep shit. Excuse my French.
And that's why.
Like they're like in hospitals and like all these crazy places, like right in the line of it.
That's what I was saying. So historically, we had been used to protect the integrity of a crime scene, and so we knew that it worked the other way around. But we realized that not only did people not fully understand that, but we do have, as I said, a lot of photojournalists in our midst. Time flies when you're having fun. We got kicked out just because we went over for an hour, but I just wanted to conclude and invite Joao Carlos back because I didn't want to finish the conversation without talking about some of these important points. So Joao is going to join us again.
No, it's okay. I didn't even realize that we were already on here for an hour.
Yeah.
But can you go back? I think it's really important what we were talking about. And I think a lot of people don't realize steps and what's going to happen, because until let's be, some way to beat this virus, some kind of vaccine, we need to really protect ourselves. So protecting our gear.
We can hear you.
Yeah. So, I just thought it was like, I didn't even realize that this was like when I grabbed, so it's kind of strange. Like when I came out, Portugal was in the midst of going under an emergency state. And I left, I spent 14 days in quarantine, self-quarantine, before I came up to the countryside, because I didn't want to put my family at risk. And, I'd just been in Italy not too long ago, so I wanted to make sure everything was okay with me. With that being said, I kind of, if I would have known, like I grabbed maybe like, a couple pairs of socks, some jeans. I didn't come thinking I'd be here for 6 weeks. And I grabbed my cameras because I always do. But now, my Outex gear is definitely going to be part of my everyday kit. Just because, again, like I said, we really need to protect ourselves to the next level, and that's what you guys are doing here. So I thought it was interesting that you were saying that before, like the FBI used to use your stuff.
Yeah, so historically, the FBI had used Outex gear to protect the integrity of a crime scene. And so they would use it because the photographers going into a crime scene would be wearing gloves and masks. But the camera, as you were saying, can be a conduit. Because the camera has so many flat surfaces, it can be an element of contagion. And we realized that not everybody had the awareness that their camera, their memory cards, their all the flat surfaces that they're putting right up against their face.
Well, that's what I was going to say. I mean, you're putting your camera up against your eye, and boom, that's it.
Right. And we have a lot of customers who are photojournalists. And so I was mentioning that not only do we have people like you that are normally maybe not photojournalists, but that are now. Brian Hodes is a cycling photographer. And then we have photojournalists like Ben Lowy in New York City that are documenting this. And we're helping each other, get the word out to protect photojournalists, to make sure that they're aware of the danger that they may put themselves in because they're just simply unaware of it. And so that's something that is a public service announcement, if you will. We put a video together. We started to work with blogs and trying to get the word out to protect the photography community. And that's one thing. And then frankly, this whole series, this outdoor photography series, was also a result of the pandemic because we were all home. We were all to some extent looking for ways to be productive. And we started talking to